Thank you. Thank you for having me here today. And our topic comes from my new book, Mastering Abundance, but it's the subtitle that really is the grabber. It is a leading edge, a fifth dimension leading edge idea for living a luminous life. Living a luminous life. And in that little video we just saw, the key was there. The key was, how do you get yourself out of the way? How do you get yourself out of the way? So, Mastering Abundance, a leading edge fifth dimensional experience for living a luminous life. So the master teacher, Jesus, whom Charles Fillmore says actually left us a legacy. Charles Fillmore, the co-founder of Unity, says that the master teacher left us a legacy, and it's found in the Gospels for those who have eyes to see and can metaphysically interpret it. And he says that legacy is the blueprint for soul mastery, soul evolution. And that when we really begin to see that blueprint, that we will begin to raise into new dimensions and levels of awareness. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in just a few moments. But I want to share a scripture from the master teacher, and it's John 10:10, and I know you've all heard it, but I want to metaphysically interpret it for you. And the scripture is, I came that they might have life and have it abundantly. You've heard it? I came that they might have life and have it abundantly. So we'll just take it in segments. I came. When Jesus was speaking of the I, according to Mr. Fillmore, he was not speaking of I, Jesus. He was speaking of I, the I am, the Christ consciousness. When the Christ consciousness comes and takes up residence, when you're willing to receive it, get yourself, little self, out of the way, when the I takes up resonance as the dominant vibration of your being, then life, that vitality, that joy, that abundance, that peace becomes that luminous quality begins to live through you, and people see it. They even say to you, oh, I see a light around you. I see light moving through you. You seem so much lighter. How many have ever had somebody say that to them? Yes. And that's the abundant life. I came that they might have life and have it abundantly. Now here's the thing. Did he say just a little bit? No, the key is he said abundantly. So the question becomes, are you ready to live a life abundant, a luminous life that is rich with luminosity and peace and joy and abundance overflowing? Are you ready? One more time. I want to hear a yes that shows that you have taken up residence with the I am. Are you ready? Yes, very good. Because yes is your empowering system. Yes, yes, is your energetic source. This is a yes universe. The universe only says yes to that which you hold as a dominant vibration. Remember that. The universe only says yes to that which you hold as a dominant vibration. That becomes important. So we're going to look at this idea of the title of the book, Mastering Abundance. So mastering, and I'm going to break it down into the two words. Mastering is an expansion of the word master. Well, according to the dictionary, a master is someone who has proficient experience, extraordinarily proficient experience and skill set in a subject or a skill. And it usually takes about 10,000 hours to become a master. So when we think about soul mastery, when we think about soul evolution, has anybody ever in your prayer time go, why aren't I further along? because it takes at least 10,000 hours to master, to truly evolve and raise consciousness into that. Now, we know things are speeding up, so the time's getting shorter and shorter, so I don't want to proclaim 10,000 hours, so just let me say that. Now, abundance. I want to start with what Charles Fillmore says about abundance. He says abundance is a spiritual principle demonstrated in consciousness, calls forth a manifestation of prosperity, calls forth a manifestation of prosperity that is in accord with your capacity to receive it. Now, I had to throw that kicker in at the end, right? That is. So it's the demonstration in consciousness of a spiritual principle that calls forth a manifestation of prosperity in accord with your capacity to receive it. So let's take those three pieces and let's look at those from a metaphysical perspective. The first one is once demonstrated in consciousness. Demonstration is always where we start. If we want something in our life, if we want abundance, we must start by demonstrating it first in consciousness. We just saw a little clip about all the things in the outer, but you don't get those without a demonstration in consciousness. It starts first by establishing the demonstration. Well, how do you do that? Well, we have all the tools, friends. We've had the tools for 100 years. Charles Fillmore says you start with honest self-observation. Honest self-observation, meaning always be looking at yourself. How am I showing up? What kind of feeling am I feeling right now? How am I projecting what's happening to me onto somebody else rather than looking at myself? Does that make sense? So honest self-observation. Then we have affirmations and denials. Affirmations and denials help us to establish. But more than anything, it is about how we feel about ourselves. It's about that I am presence and our sense of worthiness. Are we living out of third dimensional attachment to lack, limitation? And how do we know when we're living out of it? We feel it. We feel it and we speak it. It becomes the undertone of the words we speak. You want to shift out of that? Honest self-observation. Watch what you're speaking. And when you do that, and I'm going to bring in a little brain science, research, and quantum, when you do that, the reason why it works, when you're conscious about just the simply self-honesty, what are you feeling, and affirmations and denials, when you do that, you are literally beginning to rewire the neural pathways of your brain. That's how you demonstrate in consciousness, is you demonstrate because you start to rewire, retransform by being willing to release old habitual habits, allowing the knowing of who you are as an I am being. I am truth, I am peace, I am love, I am harmonic resonance. By allowing that to be the dominant vibration of your being, the feeling, the dominant feeling of your being. And Mr. Fillmore says, and it goes back to the rewiring of the neural pathways, Mr. Fillmore says that in order to demonstrate, and how do you spell demonstrate? Spell it in your own mind, D-E-M-O-S-T-R-A-T-E. He said you must get your demons straight. Which means you've got to be willing to allow the capacity of the I am of whatever it is that you want to be greater than the appearance of what you're looking at, regardless. I'm going to say it one more time. Regardless, yes, regardless. So that's the demonstration. So that's that once demonstrated in consciousness. And then he says it calls forth the manifestation of prosperity. Now, are you getting that there might be a little difference here between demonstration and abundance? Demonstration, abundance is a spiritual principle, and manifestation of prosperity. What we saw in the clip was the manifestation of prosperity. And that's wonderful, but if that's where you focus, it's going to be temporary. The demonstration must come first. So you call forth the manifestation of abundance when you demonstrate, willing to, meaning what? Willing to do the work, right? Willing to do the work. There's no spiritual bypassing here, friends. There's no spiritual bypassing. You truly have to do this, do the work. And so that the manifestation is the effect. And then the third piece is, and again, as I said earlier, the kicker, in accord to receive it. It goes back to that habitual thought. It goes back to, how much do you think of yourself? You can say all you want. I am open and receptive to a new job that is full of good fun, travel experiences, money, great salary. But then if you go, but I haven't got it yet, and I've been trying for a year, and I don't know. How many of you have done the buts? Those are the things you have to watch. That's the self-observation piece. Because the capacity to receive, you know where Jesus says in the Bible, lift up your eyes, behold the fields are ripe for harvest. You know what he's actually saying metaphysically? Lift up your consciousness. Lift up your consciousness. Don't look at what's there, this field that's just raw, but it already has lots of seeds in it. Look for the bounty that's going to happen. It's already here. It has to be. It's already here because we live right now in this moment. We live with everything fulfilled. It's just because of time and space we have to catch up with it, right? But even that, we know we can speed up, right? So that's that idea of feeling worthy to receive. So now I'm going to share with you a few stories about me. Charles Fillmore says life is an ever-progressive, ever-evolving upward spiral of conscious evolution. Life is an ever-progressive, spiral of conscious evolution. All right? So I'm going to start kind of at the beginning for me so you can kind of see this progression. When I was 4 to about the age of 6.5, we lived in a big house, and my uncles lived with us. My mom and my sisters and my uncles and my grandparents. And my Uncle John was my favorite person in the world. I'm setting that up so that you know why this happens the way it is. So from the age of 4 to 6.5, I used to dream every night, and some of you are going to be able to relate to this, that I could fly. And I would go to sleep and I would fly all over the house. And then I started venturing out. I would go outside and I'd go up to a tree and I'd put my hand through the tree and the tree leaves would turn to bills, denominational bills. And then I would swoop down and I would run my fingers through the grass and gold coins would come up in my hands. I thought I was the richest little girl. I just thought, oh my God, I mean, even as this little child, I am so rich. I am just like, oh my God, I have so much. I am so abundant. So when I'm about 6.5, this has been going on for a while. I climb up on my Uncle Johnny's lap, look at his big blue eyes, and I say, Johnny, I have something to tell you. I just felt it was time to share. And I said, Johnny, I said, I'm rich. I am so wealthy, I'm going to take care of everybody. And I said, Johnny, I go out and I fly at night and here's all this money. And Johnny looked at me with those big blue eyes and he said, Toni, you are not rich. He said, you live in Frog Hollow. He said, look at your clothes. Look at this house. He said, we are not rich. It was like a sonic boom. Boom. I lost it. I lost it. It was one of those moments in life, a consciousness tipping point. And I lost it. And I looked around, and for the first time I saw the chip paint. And I saw my clothes. And I went, oh my God, there's not enough. There's not enough. And because there wasn't enough, I thought I wasn't enough. And I lived that for 23 years. And this is how bad it got. That my aunt, one of my aunts, took me to Bahamas on a full paid vacation. And this was back in the 70s. And it was right before I found Unity. So it was kind of the culmination. And so we're there and we're going across the bridge to what was then Hog Island. It's now Paradise Island. But to get across the bridge, you had to pay a dime. Well, my Aunt Jeannie didn't have a dime. She said, Toni, will you lend me a dime? I said, sure. So I paid the 2 dimes for us to go across the street. Later that night, we're at dinner, and I say, Jeannie, do you have my dime? She said, not yet. I don't have any change. So we paid for our meal. And after the meal, I said, Jeannie, do you have my dime? And Jeannie said, not yet. So in the morning, we get up. We're brushing our teeth. And I said, Jeannie, did you... I'm so embarrassed to tell. Jeannie, did you get change for that dime yet? And Jeannie looks at me and she says, not so pleasantly, Toni, I took you on a full paid vacation and you're going to hound me over a dime. She said, you are not getting that dime. Whoa, another sonic. It felt like somebody said to me, feeling, I'm not going to give you that $1 million I lent you. I'm not going to give you back that $1 million you lent me. That's how big the dime was in my mind. Now, fast forward a few years, I find Unity. And I start practicing the principles. 1974, I found Unity, but it was actually God found me through Unity, you know? So as much as I adore Unity, I still am in real clear that God found me. So that's 1974, start practicing the principles, going to retreats, doing all the work. And in 1978, by now I'm a single mom, I am a nurse, and I do have a nice job, but I'm in debt, you know. I have this child, and life is okay. Life is okay, but there's always that, God, if I just had another $100, that would really make a difference. So I'm sitting in meditation. It's December, and we only got paid once a month at the place that I was working. And it's December, and I hear a voice, literally, you know, the voice out of the ethers, and the voice said, tithe. And literally I went, you talking to me? Tithe? 2 more times that week, tithe. I heard it. By the 3rd time, I knew I had to. So when I got my paycheck, right off the top, I wrote the check for 10% of everything. I just knew I had to. I knew that it was time to create a shift in awareness. And I started tithing, and everything I did, I started tithing on. And within a few months, I started literally having things and money and people coming to me that were wanting to share. It opened a doorway for me to a new level of awareness of abundance. It was only the first level of awareness. I realize that now. And I was really focusing on things in the outer. I was in a prosperity consciousness. I hadn't developed an abundance consciousness. I was focusing on the tithing to get. But that's okay. It's a place to start, you know? It's where you start. So that was the story of all of this. And then fast forward, great things happening to me. In 1987, I was working at the American Nurses Association. I was senior staff specialist, developing certification and accreditation standards of practice for the nurses across the nation. And we started to develop the tests, the certification tests that are now for ER and emergency room and all of that. And they decided to move from Kansas City, American Nurses Association, to Washington, D.C. I didn't want to go, so I went in and I handed in my resignation that I was staying in Kansas City. That afternoon, I get a call from Unity. Somebody had taken my resume to Unity and put it in for the Dean of Administration. And they called me, asked me if I wanted to come for an interview. I went for an interview. I got the job. Long story short, I got the job. That was like the next day. 2 weeks later, I start the job. A week into the job, Connie Fillmore calls me and says, how would you like to go to ministerial school? We'll pay for all your books. We'll pay for all your classes. And the secretary will take your paper. Well, what fool would pass up on that, right? So that's how I became a minister. So I graduated in 1989 in the centennial class, because Unity was started in 1889. And in that centennial class, so that was in June 6th, we graduated. And in July, SCE, we called it CEP then, was going to be started. It was a 2-week program. And as the Dean of Administration, I was responsible for getting all the faculty and setting up all those classes. And my boss, Vice President of Education, called me in and said, whoa, this was on Thursday before the Monday. And he says, Toni, we have an issue. And I said, what? Can I help you? He said, well, maybe. He said, the person who was to teach prosperity on Monday had an emergency appendectomy this morning. And he said, so we have no teacher for prosperity. I said, no problem. I will get right on that. He goes, no. He says, I already have the teacher. And I looked at him. I said, you do? And he says, yes. Oh, no. No, you don't understand. I'm the Dean of Administration. I don't teach. And he goes, see you on Monday, and hands me all these books. So that was my first foray into teaching prosperity, and it opened so many doors it hasn't stopped. So that is that evolution of consciousness. Now fast forward all these years later, now I understand prosperity at a whole different level. I understand it as the demonstration of abundance in consciousness. Yes. And so life is that ever-progressive upward spiral of conscious evolution. And Charles Fillmore, and you hear me say a lot about raising our level of awareness. I want to leave you with a thought and then another question. Charles Fillmore says that he wrote, for those of you, any of you who followed him, he wrote articles on what he called the fourth dimension. And he wrote them in Keep It True Land, he wrote them in Atom Smashing Power of Mind, and he wrote a whole series of articles called The Fourth Dimension in Man. What he says in the fourth dimension is, so we have third dimension, which is this time-space that we live in, but it's really a dimension that's filled with fear and lack and limitation and what are you doing to me and why are you against me and things like that. When we find new thought, we start to pop, Mr. Fillmore says, into fourth dimension. He says, because metaphysics is a fourth dimensional teaching. And he said, Jesus, through his ascension, really created the blueprint for us to pave the way to fifth dimension and higher consciousness. Not woo-woo, friends. Practical application of principle, moving us forward by realizing the truth of who we are in that I am. And that's all Jesus did. He kept evolving that sense of the I am until he had such mastery over it that he was able to truly take on that light body and do all of the things that he did. Walk through walls, walk on water, take the light body and ascend. So that's that whole idea of soul mastery, the spiritual journey. So that's part of what Mr. Fillmore, but again, as many times as I read those, I've never read them from the capacity that I see it now as I'm looking at everything through the quote, which I started doing this about 10 years ago, of Nikola Tesla, that says, if you want to know how the universe works, think in terms of energy, vibration, and frequency. Book Mastering Abundance is about. So I'm going to leave you with a quote by Joe Dispenza. And the quote is, if you want to overcome, break free of old habits, worn out emotions, and stagnation, become a quantum observer, self-observer. He says, the quantum principle says, reality only happens when there is consciousness to observe it, and the expectation of that consciousness plays a role in determining the outcome. So the question becomes, do you want to look at third dimensional lack, limitation, and fear getting this and fear getting that? Or do you want to raise your consciousness into that fourth dimensional level where you start to look beyond appearance and you start to look at the idea, I am that I am. Are you ready to move to a new level of conscious awareness even more than you already are? And if so, say yes. Yes. God bless you all and have a great journey. Oh, meditation. Sorry, I thought my part was over. Come back, come back. I apologize. So I want to do something different for you for meditation. So I just invite you to close your eyes and just know that it's going to be different. Just close your eyes. Allow your attention to slide down into that heart space. And Charles Fillmore in Jesus Christ Heals says that we are in vibrational relationship with everything. It is vibrations that, through our words, through our singing, through our chanting, that go down into our cellular memories and break up crystallized thoughts. So holding that idea of releasing, letting go, I'm going to share with you one of the most powerful resonant prayers in Aramaic, the ancient language that Jesus spoke. And it is the Lord's Prayer. But it is in that ancient healing language, that sound vibrational language of the Aramaic. So just allow this sound and vibration to go down into your cellular memories and do its work in you. Debushmeya Nithkadish Shmach Tete Melkutach Nechwe Seviana Aikana Af Baraha Havlan Lachma Desun Kanan Yamana Washbuklan Haubain Wachtahin Aikana Daf Hanan Shwakan Lchayabain Wela Tatlan Lenisuna Ailach Patsan Minbisha Matol Delehe Melkuta Wahala Wateshbukta La'alam Amin Amen Matolele he melkuta wa haila wa tashbukta lalam amin amen lalam amin amen Matolele he melkuta wa haila wa tashbukta lalam amin amen la halam amin amen. now and forever. It is so. I am that I am. I feel it, I see it, I know it, I be it, and so it is. Bringing your attention back to this space, back to this awareness. We send forth the blessing of energy, and so it is. Amen. When you're ready, open your eyes.